Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on the weekend of November the 25th and 26th, 2023. So my topic in this video is going to be the full moon. There's a full moon on Monday the 27th of November 2023, and so I will be looking at this full moon, how it's going to affect us, and how it's going to affect the world. But before I do that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for this weekend, the weekend of November the 25th and 26th of November 2023. So let's go straight into the chart for the weekend. Okay, so what's happening? Okay, for pretty much all of this weekend, the moon is in Taurus. So you can see this is a chart set for midnight on Saturday, Sunday. So the moment where Saturday becomes Sunday, set for New York. So this is kind of the middle of the weekend. And we can see that the moon is in Taurus. So we can say the usual things about Taurus. It's a good sign for Taurus to be in. The moon is exalted in Taurus. It's good for finding stability. It's good actually for luxury. So if you enjoy the pleasures of life, then moon in Taurus can certainly help out there. It's quite a sensual position, the moon in Taurus, but there is some danger there that we overdo it. Perhaps spending too much money, maybe just being lazy in that sort of luxury-loving kind of way. Now, there are two conjunctions the moon makes when it's in Taurus. There's a conjunction between the moon and Jupiter and a conjunction between the moon and Uranus. That conjunction between the moon and Jupiter is more going to be of a Saturday thing, whereas the moon conjunct Uranus is Saturday, Sunday, depends where you are. So the beginning of a weekend with that moon conjunct Jupiter, is pretty fortunate. So on early Saturday, many of us may have some luck. We can certainly enjoy ourselves. So the weekend in a way gets off to an early start, and in some respects, the best part of a weekend is the first part. So consider that with the moon conjunct Jupiter. Moon conjunct Uranus is a bit unstable. Things can just happen, but we weren't planning on doing. At the same time, moon is a fixed sign. The moon is in a fixed sign, Taurus is a fixed sign, so there can be a great deal of stubbornness with that moon in Taurus, particularly conjunct Uranus. When people have decided that the world is configured in a particular way, they'd like you to stick to it, and finding flexibility may be hard work. And now I should say that if you are in the United States or in the Americas in general, the moon actually goes into Gemini late on Sunday. So if you're in New York, 7:40 p.m. on Sunday, moon goes into Gemini. So I don't know what you're doing on Sunday evening, but it may be, for example, if Sunday evening is starting to seem a bit dull and you're a social animal on the East Coast, then you might see sudden activity as the moon moves into Gemini. If you're in Los Angeles, Portland, Oregon, Vancouver, Seattle, then the moon goes into Gemini at 4:40 p.m. on Sunday, so late afternoon. So if you're in the Americas, then late on Sunday you do see a change from from Taurus to Gemini. Yeah, in some respects that's good news because Gemini is more about action, activity, and whatever. The trouble is that this moment the moon goes into Gemini, it makes a square with Saturn, so that may bring some sort of unexpected restriction. It's like being very excited that there's a change, and then as soon as you actually take advantage of a change, you hit a brick wall. So there might be a bit of a problem there. Now, as far as what is the most important aspect this weekend, well, I'm afraid it's a Mars-Saturn square. This is a position for midnight on Saturday, Sunday. You can see that Saturn is at 056 Pisces. Mars is at 116 Sagittarius. So Mars is just past the square of Saturn. So this square between Mars and Saturn, it's bad. It's a bad aspect. No doubt about it. Mars and Saturn are the two malefics. Saturn is the greater malefic. Mars is the lesser malefic. And so when they're in square to each other, there can be real frustration, which may cancel out a lot of that Moon in Taurus stuff that I was talking about, if we're not careful. So Mars square Saturn is about frustration, not getting what we want. It's, switching on the news and thinking, wow, this is bad. So at worst, Mars-Saturn squares is about death and destruction. So, you have to decide how you're going to deal with it. There is a positive side to Mars square Saturn, but maybe you don't want to address it. The positive side for Mars square Saturn would be to work hard. No, not just hard, really hard. Gruelingly hard, to really push yourself. So if you want to do that, then yeah, that would be a good way to take advantage of the Mars-Saturn square. I suppose if you want to get involved in a really heavy, nasty argument, Mars square Saturn might be good. If you want to write something very unpleasant, Mars square Saturn would be good. You can really, the nastiness can pour out, getting those words out that are dripping with poison. Yeah, maybe that's a way to take advantage of Mars square Saturn. But overall, it's a somewhat negative influence. And this Mars square Saturn it's on the Jupiter-Neptune midpoint. Jupiter-Neptune is about our ideas, not just, not sort of the mental ideas, but our fantasies, our dreams, Jupiter-Neptune, the way we'd like the world to be. And I think that with this Mars-Saturn square, we may get the feeling that this way we want the world to be and the way the world actually is, it's just not going to happen. And so if we really look around us, look at the world, and we compare what we see with what we'd like to see, and we're going to see a huge gap. And so for some of us, there may be a sense of despondency that the world around us really is bad, and that whatever our dreams for ourselves and humanity, in some respects, they're not going to happen. So there's a bit of a downer there. I suppose some of us might say, okay, these are my dreams. This is the way I'd like the world to be. But I know it's just really hard. It's not going to happen. Maybe some of us will say, well, okay, I'm going to have to really struggle and fight to get what I want, to make the world in my image. It's not a good idea to ever want to see the world in your image, because that is crazy, really, isn't it? Unless you're God. So that might not be a good idea. Uh, another aspect going on today is Mercury. There's Mercury at 23.5 Sagittarius. There's Jupiter at 27.36 Taurus. They're actually in sesquiquadrate aspect, Mercury-Jupiter sesquiquadrate. So Mercury is about communication. Jupiter is about expansion. So there is going to be a lot we want to say. And once the talking starts, it may be difficult to stop, even though there is a Mars-Saturn square. So there is this struggle to communicate. Many of us, we've got so much we want to talk about. Maybe stuff that's bothering us. And look at how Mercury is in Sagittarius. Despite that Mars square Saturn, Mercury is in Sagittarius. Mercury likes to communicate. Mercury likes to reach out and share its ideas with the world. And so Mercury sesquiquadrate Jupiter is the struggle to communicate. And I think it is a struggle. Having to deal with all of these sort of blocks, and I think we're going to be concerned that we might be judged in a particular way, that the sort of authority structures around us might not actually like what we're saying. So we have to be careful of that. Maybe we're being paranoid, though. That is a possibility. So that's the weekend. I think this weekend we have to kind of focus on what is good for most of us and kind of steer clear of what is bad. So try to focus on Moon and Taurus, stability, enjoying life's pleasures and luxuries, but not too much. The Moon Jupiter is very fortunate in isolation. So just focus on that and keep it simple. As I said, for most of us, we need to avoid the world at large, I would have said. Don't think too much about, the fact that probably the world is, what do they say, going to hell in a handbasket or whatever, which I think that Mars square Saturn is going to encourage us to think that way. Perhaps don't read the news. Don't look too closely at what's going on in your community. I know we should be open-minded people. We should understand other people's society's pain and all of that kind of stuff. But maybe this weekend you want to just avoid that. Unless you are the kind of person that wants to crusade, wants to change the world. In that case, maybe the Mars-Saturn square can be useful, but it will be grueling. You've got to work really, really hard to take advantage of it. Okay, so now what I want to do is do my forecasts for the 12 signs. So, my forecasts are not always very good, I'm afraid, simply because they have to reflect what's going on this weekend. So bear that in mind when you listen to what I'm saying. If you listen to what I'm saying, maybe you've gone by now, but okay, so here are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of November the 25th and 26th, 2023. Aries. It could be a frustrating weekend. There are lots of things you want to do, but achieving them could be hard work, and it might seem that circumstances are throwing numerous obstacles in your path. But a person or a situation who seems a problem could actually be a blessing in disguise. Taurus. The moon is moving through your star sign, making conjunctions to Jupiter and Uranus. You'll have a fair amount of good fortune, and most things should go your way. Yet the people around you may not be on great form, and their negativity could drag you down. You either do something to make them feel better, or you stay out of their way. Gemini. Other people continue to exert their influence, and in your opinion, it's probably too much influence. There's possibly nothing much you can do about this in the short term. So accept the situation and make the most of existing relationships. But time spent on your own can be useful, maybe lucky as well. Cancer. It looks like being a pleasant weekend when you can make the most of everything that's on offer. And ideally, you'll spend time with friends, and if you can go to a party, then so much the better. Also, you don't have to conform to any image or stereotype. What everyone wants to see is the real you in all your glory. Leo. I hope you've got plans for the weekend, because it could be a very useful weekend. And just focusing on having fun might be a complete waste of time. With the moon in a high-profile sector of your solar chart, conjunct Jupiter and Uranus, you're in a position to make things happen and to make new contacts. And big ideas can be turned into reality, or at least you can start the process. Virgo. Other people need to be figured out. It's difficult to know what they're thinking, but their actions can have an impact on you. You therefore need to consider their motives and, if possible, anticipate their next moves. On a different note, it's time to get close to Mother Earth, because today the physical environment matters, and if it is possible to speak to the plants, then this weekend you have the opportunity to do it. Libra. Just because something is complicated doesn't mean that it should be avoided. You need to work out what's going on and what is at stake, and then you can make a decision. And sometimes, when you delve deeply into the complexities, you start to see a solution that saves you time and grief, and perhaps money as well. Scorpio. If you're on your own, you're not really in a position to benefit from everything going on around you. But once you link up with other people, things start happening, and relationships can become very significant. You have to allow the other person to be optimistic and forward-thinking, and not let your caution and reserve spoil things. Sagittarius. You're ready for action, and probably you're fairly impulsive as well. But this weekend, circumstances are running against you. Impulsive actions are unlikely to be successful, and you may feel that there's nothing you can do to express your inner feelings. Yet, in reality, it's all about having focus and discipline. You also need to listen. A bit of physical exercise can do you the world of good, and perhaps will help you to burn off some of your frustrations. Capricorn. Mars is making a stressful aspect to Saturn, and your ruling planet. So this weekend there's plenty of scope for being irritated. People and situations are annoying, though as Mars is a male planet, the main annoyance might be men with an attitude. But on the plus side, if you make the right choices, you can have fun, with the right non-Mars individuals helping you out. Aquarius. Like with Capricorn, Mars is causing problems, being square Saturn, your ruling planet. There are annoyances, and it's important that you don't overreact. And I'm afraid that the best way of avoiding these annoyances is to avoid large-scale social gatherings. The one person you can trust, though, is you yourself. Pisces. This weekend, there's a difficult square between Mars and Saturn. In a general sense, it is bad news, but because Mars and Saturn are in the main angles of your solar chart, you can take advantage of it. You just have to be super tough. Decide what you want, refuse to tolerate any opposition, and then you'll be surprised how much progress you make. So I'm now going to move to the I Ching. As always, I ask the question, what is the weekend going to be like for people watching this video? So I threw 3 coins, 6 times, and I got this hexagram. Hexagram 62, preponderance of the small. Now, preponderance of the small is about not striving for too much. And, that kind of fits with the fact that we've got a Mars-Saturn square this weekend. A Mars-Saturn square, it could be really very frustrating. It may be really difficult to get anything done. So we need to really keep, we need to keep things in perspective. What actually can we achieve? Don't try to fly too high. The I Ching, when it talks about this hexagram, it sort of talks about a bird and how high this bird is going in the sky. We don't want to go too high because otherwise things will go wrong. So we need to have really quite limited ambitions this weekend. And then, I think that things should be okay. Now, there is a moving line here. This second line from the bottom is moving. This second line is indicative of perhaps a choice. There are, well, not a choice, but there's something we want, and there's a second best choice, or rather, perhaps we want to meet someone, but there's also a someone else who might be a second best. We might want to do, there might be 2 things that are possible. One thing we'd really like, which would be the icing on the cake, but another thing which isn't quite so good. At least we feel that it's not quite so good. And because this is preponderance of the small, we should perhaps be always aiming for the second best choice, the second best thing we want to do. So let's say you've got, let's say you're going to, there are 2 parties to go to. One is a party you'd really like to go to, and the second party is one, well, maybe it'd be nice to go to, but not so good. You should perhaps go for the one that's not quite so good. If meetings with the second best. Now, that might sound strange to go for the second best choice, but the first best choice, the best choice, there might just be too many demands on you. It just might be too difficult, and circumstances might come together which mean that it just doesn't happen. There is, I wouldn't say a warning, but just a suggestion that second best might be best. Anyway, this hexagram number 62, we've got a moving line, so that does mean that it does move to a different hexagram, and it moves to hexagram 32, which is duration. Okay, duration is a kind of a fairly boring hexagram, but it's quite a useful one. It means we have to persist, and because this is we've got a moving hexagram, moving line, probably this hexagram relates more to Sunday than to Saturday, and it's just telling us we need to keep going. If we're not sure what to do, we just need to focus on what is good about ourselves and just keep moving with it. Now, the James Legge version of the I Ching, or of his translation of it, he says about this hexagram, or the hexagram duration, he says, continuously acting out the law of one's being. In other words, we have to be ourselves. We have our own law. We know in ourselves what is right, what is the right way to behave for us, not in general, not for society, but for us. What are our good points? What makes us special? We need to focus on that. We mustn't try to be something else. We mustn't try to fit into other people's ideas. Just focus on that. And I think that's going to be, particularly useful when we think about it, in an astrological sense, when you've got, all of these sort of frustrations, particularly with Mars square Saturn, which will dominate this weekend. Let's face it, that Mars square Saturn will dominate the weekend. It's about not worrying about it and just continuing and just, yeah, just doing what we do best and not listening to not listening to other people and focusing on our character. And I think that is a way to handle this weekend. Okay, so now I'm going to finish up by doing a preview of Monday's full moon. So let's look at this full moon. Okay, so top right, there's a full moon, and there is a full moon. So this full moon, okay, there it is. Okay, there's the full moon. I've set this chart for Westminster in England. No reason why I should set it for Westminster, England. So here we can see that the moon is at 4:51 Gemini and the sun is at 4:51 Sagittarius. Now this full moon takes place at 9:16 a.m. in London. So that means it's going to take place at that would be 4:16 a.m. in New York, 1:16 a.m. in Los Angeles, 10:16 a.m. in Paris, Berlin. It will take place in the evening in Australia, New Zealand. So it kind of depends where you are when this full moon happens. So this full moon. Okay, it's a full moon. So full moon is about understanding, a realization. We can see the world as it is. We can see the truth of the matter. At least we can see the truth of the matter if we're honest with ourselves. And the moon is in Gemini. So if the moon is in Gemini, that is about thought. It's about ideas. It's also about the challenge. The moon in Gemini is about the way we think, but then its opposition, the sun in Sagittarius. So the way we think may be challenged by the sun in Sagittarius, which is the truth of the matter. And Sagittarius is about the truth in many respects. So what do we do when we see the truth? This is the way it is. And so that might be quite a difficult moment for us to deal with that. So that's one aspect of it. And this full moon is quite difficult in the sense that Mars, look at Mars, we've had a Sun-Mars conjunction, now we've still got this Sun-Mars conjunction. So the moon is opposition the Sun-Mars conjunction, and Saturn is, there's our Mars-Saturn square. It's breaking up a bit, but it's still there. And so this full moon is linking up with the Mars-Saturn square, which isn't great. So the full moon and the Mars-Saturn, throw them together, and you might get the realization of how awful the world is. I mean, that is one interpretation of it. Or it might be an interpretation of the danger that we are in. I mean, I don't necessarily mean that in an individual sense, but in a societal sense. We see the full picture, and this full moon is going to make it very clear, what kind of frustrations and delays we have to deal with in our life. In that sense, I think it's going to be yet another difficult full moon. Now, I understand if you've been watching my videos for some time, you might be taking a view that I'm always negative. But then, with this full moon, how can I not be negative with this full moon? I mean, think about it. Well, you've got a full moon. Full moons tend to be negative, all things being equal. You've got a full moon, which is conjunct Mars, which is square Saturn. How can I be positive about that? It's just not possible to be positive with that. Having said that, there is a spiritual angle to this full moon. There is a spiritual side to this. I normally try to avoid the spirituality of these things because it's just fluff. It's usually just nonsense, saying sort of pleasantries to make people feel happy about themselves. But there is this Mercury square Neptune, which is exact at the same time as the full moon. Now, Mercury square Neptune, in many respects, is also a difficult aspect because it's about delusion. It's about plain fantasy. It's about being deceived. It's about, reaching the wrong conclusions. And this may well be another aspect to another side to this full moon because it takes place at the same time as the Mercury Neptune square. So yeah, a lot of people are going to be talking nonsense, and a lot of people are going to be trying to deceive each other. So look at the news. Look at the false narratives that people are talking about in the news. This is a time, full moon of Mercury square Neptune. People, probably the mainstream media is going to be churning out nonsense, churning out sort of stories that just don't make any sense, which are based on lies. I mean, that is a possibility. Mercury square Neptune, just complete lies. But the full moon is about revelation, and revelation is about seeing through the lies that are all around us. So yeah, we've got the Mercury square Neptune, but taking place at the same time as a full moon. So it's a time, if we open our eyes, we can see through the lies. And I think that could be a very positive aspect to the full moon, but maybe quite a depressing aspect as well. Now, as far as the spirituality is concerned, it really sort of relates to some midpoints. When I look at the full moon, what I do need to do is ask myself, what midpoints is this full moon on? And so let me just show you. Let's look at the 90-degree dial. As I said, don't worry too much how it's set up. Okay, so we're going to put the arrow on the full moon. There, you see, I put the arrow on the full moon. So we're looking at the symmetry around the full moon. And there is the Mercury-Neptune square. You see, because it's a 90-degree dial, the square is a conjunction. That's because, Mercury is at 21 Sagittarius, 23 Sagittarius or whatever, is the same as 23 Pisces, which is Neptune. So they're all compressed they're all compressed, and the squares and the conjunctions, the squares and the oppositions, they all become conjunctions. And so there's the Mercury-Neptune conjunction. There's the full moon, and we look at the symmetry, and the symmetry here is on this hypothetical planet called Poseidon. Now, Poseidon, I'll be honest, it's a hypothetical planet I'm a bit dubious about. I'm not convinced that it necessarily works, but the Hamburg school use it as one of their 8 hypotheticals. So let's see what happens. Let's play with Poseidon. And so we can say that the Sun-Moon conjunction, the full moon, it's not a conjunction, but remember, the reason the Sun and the Moon together is because this 90-degree dial, it treats conjunctions, oppositions, and squares as the same. So it turns the full moon into a sun and a moon together, and it moves the square. And then we've got they're linked up with Poseidon. So full moon on the Mercury Poseidon midpoint. Poseidon is like, what is Poseidon? Poseidon is like a higher octave of Neptune. It's like Neptune, but perhaps even more spiritual, even more transcendental, even more cosmic. And so, if Poseidon works as a body, then Mercury Poseidon gives us intense spirituality and the ability to see beyond the material realm, to move way beyond it, and to start to to see our place in the cosmos. So perhaps that's what it's telling us to do. I've been very negative about this full moon, but with this full moon on the Mercury Poseidon midpoint, I think the challenge is to look beyond everything, to look beyond the war and the poverty and the homelessness and the drugs and the mental health illness, the mental health issues, all the stuff that's around us, and just to see it in a wider cosmic perspective and to really think like that. As soon as you just say, well, this is all going to pass. This is all, in terms of the life of the universe, this is nothing. And that's perhaps how we should see it. And maybe also with the new moon on the Neptune Poseidon midpoint. So you can see how how Poseidon has brought together the full moon and the Mercury Neptune square. It's brought them together, and it's perhaps giving us a resolution. We need to sort of look beyond it, but also be realistic, because the full moon on the Neptune Poseidon midpoint, plenty of scope for self-deception there. So we have to look beyond it and just see, and perhaps think about history. This happens every now and then. This is just part of the unfolding of humanity, and not maybe go beyond humanity. Just the unfolding of the whole creative purpose, and we just need to sort of merge into it, and maybe then we can start to get some perspective. Okay, so that's an alternative way of looking at the full moon. I wanted to finish by looking at this full moon in terms of where on Earth it might have an impact. So if we look at the astrocartography for this full moon, you can see this. There's the full moon. This is the line where the full moon is exactly on the midheaven, and it's exactly on the midheaven in Moscow. It is so. Let me. It's also exactly on the midheaven in Donetsk. Donetsk is this part of Ukraine which is currently occupied by Russia, and so let me just show you that. Okay, so this is the full moon set for. Well, it's actually set for. If I pronounce this right, Avdiivka, which is a sort of suburb. This is a full moon set for Avdiivka, which is a suburb of Donetsk, which is still occupied by Ukraine, Ukraine has been there for a long time. They've been the Ukrainians in Avdiivka have been using that as a place for example, for shelling civilians in Donetsk, and a lot of civilians have been killed by Ukrainian artillery since 2014. So, and they've been stuck there, and they're under a lot of pressure, and it's getting a lot of news. This place, Avdiivka. And if you set the full moon for Avdiivka, you see that the full moon is at 451 Gemini, and the midheaven, the IC, is at 446 Gemini. So this full moon is right on it, and at the moment, Ukraine is under a huge amount of pressure there, and some people are saying that Avdiivka might fall to the Russians within weeks. I don't know; these things always take much longer, but. With the full moon there, it's really powerful, and so maybe we'll get a lot of news from Avdiivka. I mean, we're already getting a huge amount of news from Avdiivka if you look, but we may be getting more things happening there. I don't know whether Avdiivka will fall between now and the new moon. I suppose that's unlikely. I mean, the Ukrainians are pretty resilient there, but we might get some action there. Um, so that's one thing about this full moon. But if you look at the map, uh, if you look at the map, that's another way of looking at it. That's there's the full moon. There you can see it in another way. You see, there's a full moon going right the way through eastern Ukraine. But this line that I was talking about, if you follow it south, if we follow this line south and we look at the whole world, it kind of tells us what we that's a bit extreme. But if you, I'm sorry, this is a pretty unpleasant map. But if you follow this new moon, the area where the full moon is on the icy midheaven icy, and you follow it down, it just goes straight through the Middle East. You can see it goes through Moscow, goes down through the Black Sea, goes through Turkey, and then it goes through pretty much Gaza. And in fact, if we set the chart up for Gaza, if we set the full moon for Gaza, we see that the midheaven is at 138 Sagittarius. So so the full moon is pretty close to the midheaven. Here Mars is very close to the midheaven, set for Gaza. Now, if I've got the news right, I think some hostages have just been released. But I think when this full moon, as soon as you get the full moon, I don't know how long, is there a 5-day ceasefire? I should know, but I haven't been following the news as well as I should have been. What this full moon does is it focuses on two hotspots which we already know exist. Not just, the Ukraine war is a hotspot, but it actually focuses on the major hotspot of the Ukraine war, which is Avdiivka. It also focuses on the Middle East and the hotspot in the Middle East, which is Gaza. So these two places and these two conflicts, obviously, you don't need astrology to tell this, but what I'm saying is that astrology does highlight it anyway. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say for now. I hope you didn't find what I was saying too depressing. But maybe we should just think of it in terms of the full moon on the Mercury Poseidon midpoint. Maybe that's how we should see it. It's all about getting the whole thing in perspective. It's just these are just in terms of history. All of the bad things we're seeing, it's just nothing. It's completely incidental. And so we just need to see the larger cosmic picture. And by seeing the cosmic picture, maybe we can feel happier about ourselves and the world. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.